In the year 2147, humanity's understanding of the universe changed forever when an alien vessel descended through Earth's atmosphere. The craft was unlike anything imagined in human history, a shimmering, iridescent teardrop that seemed to bend light itself as it moved. It landed in the heart of the Sahara Desert with an otherworldly grace, its immense size dwarfing everything around it. When the beings emerged, they shattered every preconceived notion of what alien life might look like. Towering at nearly 12 feet tall, their forms shimmered with crystalline structures that pulsed with an inner light, and their movements were fluid, almost hypnotic, as though their bodies were made of liquid glass. Among them stood a figure who commanded attention without effort. Her presence radiated authority, her form glowing with an ethereal brilliance that made the surrounding sand seem to dance in mesmerizing patterns. Her eyes, or what humans interpreted as eyes, were vast, swirling galaxies, endless and unknowable, drawing in anyone who dared to meet her gaze. She moved with purpose, her attendants instinctively parting to give her space as she stepped forward, her focus already locked onto one individual in the human delegation. Dr. Elias Carter felt his breath catch the moment their eyes met. A xenobiologist who had spent decades preparing for this very moment, he found himself unprepared for the weight of her stare. It wasn't just the intensity of her gaze but the way it seemed to pierce through him, as if she could see not just his surface but the very essence of who he was. Around them, the desert stretched endlessly, its golden dunes frozen in time by the gravity of the encounter. The air hummed with an energy that felt almost alive, vibrating between them like an invisible thread pulling them closer. The human delegation stood frozen, their carefully rehearsed protocols forgotten in the face of her singular focus on Carter. She moved toward him, each step creating ripples in the sand that spread outward in perfect symmetry. Her crystalline form shifted subtly, refracting light in patterns that seemed to pulse in time with his heartbeat. He felt exposed, as though every thought, every emotion, was laid bare before her. Yet there was no malice in her gaze, only a profound curiosity, as if she had found something unexpected and deeply intriguing. Carter's mind raced, years of study and preparation colliding with the reality of standing before an intelligence so fundamentally different from anything humanity had ever encountered. Her geometric features rearranged themselves into patterns that seemed to convey meaning, though no words passed between them. When she extended one of her multi-jointed limbs toward him, the movement was deliberate yet gentle, carrying an air of exploration rather than threat. The gesture was intimate, almost tender, as if she were reaching out to touch not just his physical form but something deeper within him. The other humans watched in stunned silence, their instruments forgotten in their hands. The Queen's attendants formed a loose circle around them, their own forms dimming slightly in deference to her singular focus. Carter became acutely aware of every detail, the way sunlight fractured through her crystalline body, casting prismatic reflections across the sand, the subtle shifts in her patterns, each one seeming to resonate with a meaning he couldn't fully grasp. Time seemed to stretch and compress all at once, the moment heavy with significance yet fleeting in its intensity. Her gaze never wavered, and neither did his. There was something in her expression, or what he interpreted as expression, that suggested recognition, as though she had been waiting for this moment, for him. The connection between them transcended language, transcended species, existing on a plane that defied explanation. And then, without warning, she turned her head slightly, her crystalline features shifting into a new configuration. A ripple of movement passed through her attendants, and Carter realized with a start that she was about to speak, or communicate, in some way. The anticipation was electric, the air thick with unspoken questions. What would she say? What did she want? And why, out of everyone present, had she chosen him? The alien queen's crystalline features shifted again, and a sound began to emanate from her. Not a voice in the human sense, but a cascade of resonant tones that seemed to vibrate through the very bones of everyone present. The frequencies intertwined, rising and falling in patterns that felt almost musical, yet impossibly complex. Carter's mind struggled to process it, his scientific training clashing with the raw, instinctual part of him that wanted to simply feel what she was conveying. Around him, the other humans shifted uneasily, their instruments whirring as they tried to capture and analyze the phenomenon, but it was clear even to them that this communication transcended mere data. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the sound ceased. The Queen turned her gaze back to Carter, her swirling eyes locking onto his with an intensity that made his chest tighten. She extended one of her multi-jointed limbs again, this time gesturing not toward him but to the horizon beyond. Her attendants moved subtly, forming a path in the direction she indicated, their forms shimmering faintly as if lit from within. The message was unmistakable. She wanted him to follow. Carter hesitated, his heart pounding. Every fiber of his scientific curiosity urged him forward, but the weight of the moment pressed down on him. He glanced back at the human delegation, their faces pale and uncertain, their eyes wide with a mixture of awe and fear. Some of them nodded almost imperceptibly, their expressions a mix of encouragement and resignation. Others looked away, unable to meet his gaze. He realized, with a pang of something he couldn't quite name, that this decision was his alone to make. Taking a deep breath, Carter stepped forward, his boots sinking slightly into the soft sand. The Queen's form brightened momentarily, as if in approval, and she began to move gracefully toward the horizon. Her attendants fell into step behind her, their movements fluid and synchronized, like dancers in a ritual older than time itself. Carter followed, his footsteps deliberate but measured, each step taking him further away from the familiar and deeper into the unknown. As they walked, the landscape around them seemed to shift subtly, though whether it was an actual change or some trick of perception, Carter couldn't tell. The golden dunes of the Sahara stretched endlessly in every direction, but now they seemed infused with a strange luminescence, as though the very earth was responding to the presence of the alien beings. The air grew cooler, tinged with an unfamiliar scent, something sharp and metallic, yet oddly soothing. Carter's senses were heightened, every detail standing out in stark relief. The way the light refracted through the Queen's crystalline body, the rhythmic hum of her attendants' movements, the faint whisper of the wind carrying traces of sounds he couldn't quite place. After what felt like both an eternity and no time at all, they reached a structure that hadn't been there before, or perhaps it had always been there, hidden from human perception until now. It rose from the desert like a mirage made solid, its surface a shifting mosaic of colors and patterns that defied description. The architecture was alien in every sense of the word, with curves and angles that seemed to bend the laws of physics, creating spaces that appeared both vast and intimate at the same time. Carter felt a shiver run down his spine as he approached, the weight of history pressing down on him. This was no ordinary building. It was a living thing, pulsing with energy and purpose. The Queen paused at the entrance, her form glowing brighter as she turned to face Carter once more. For the first time since their encounter began, she seemed to hesitate, her geometric features rearranging themselves in rapid succession. Carter felt a surge of emotion. Was it uncertainty? Anticipation? He couldn't be sure. But then she raised one of her limbs again, this time pointing directly at him. The gesture was unmistakable, and it sent a jolt of adrenaline coursing through his veins. From behind her, one of the attendants stepped forward, carrying something in its grasp. It was an object unlike anything Carter had ever seen. A sphere of shifting, liquid-like metal that seemed to hover inches above the attendant's limb. The surface of the sphere rippled and swirled, reflecting not just the light around it but something deeper, something that felt almost alive. Carter's breath caught in his throat as the attendant extended the sphere toward him, the Queen watching intently. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly, and as his fingers brushed against the sphere's surface, a surge of energy coursed through him. It wasn't painful exactly, but it was overwhelming, like being struck by lightning and bathed in sunlight all at once. Images flooded his mind. Scenes of distant worlds, civilizations rising and falling, stars being born and dying, all unfolding in an instant that felt like an eternity. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the vision faded, leaving him gasping for air. The Queen's gaze bore into him, her expression unreadable but somehow expectant. Carter realized with a start that she was waiting for something, for him to react, to understand, to do something. But what? His mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of what he had just experienced, but they slipped through his grasp like water through cupped hands. All he knew was that the sphere, and whatever it represented, was important. Vital, even. And then, without warning, the Queen turned and entered the structure, her attendants following silently behind her. Carter stood frozen for a moment, the sphere still hovering inches from his palm, its surface rippling gently as if in response to his thoughts. He knew, with a certainty that defied logic, that he had to follow her. Whatever was happening, whatever she wanted from him, it was bigger than him, bigger than humanity itself. Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward, crossing the threshold into the alien structure. Inside, the space defied all comprehension. Walls seemed to stretch infinitely in every direction, their surfaces alive with shifting patterns that told stories Carter couldn't fully understand. The air hummed with a low, resonant frequency, and the light seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. The Queen stood at the center of the room, her form glowing brighter than ever, her crystalline features shifting in ways that suggested urgency. She gestured again, this time toward a platform that rose from the floor, its surface covered in intricate designs that pulsed with a soft, inviting light. Carter approached cautiously, the sphere still hovering beside him. As he stepped onto the platform, he felt a sudden rush of vertigo, as though the ground beneath him had fallen away. The Queen's attendants formed a circle around him, their forms dimming slightly as the platform began to rise, carrying him upward into the heart of the structure. Above him, the ceiling, or what he thought was the ceiling, opened like a flower blooming, revealing a view of the sky that was unlike anything he had ever seen. Stars burned brighter here, their light tinged with colors that didn't exist in the human spectrum. Planets hung suspended in the void, their surfaces alive with movement and energy. The Queen's voice, or whatever passed for her voice, filled the space again, the resonant tones wrapping around him like a cocoon. This time, the message was clearer, though still impossible to fully comprehend. She was showing him something. A choice, perhaps, or a responsibility. The sphere in his hand pulsed in time with her words, its surface rippling with images that seemed to mirror her message. Carter felt the weight of it settling over him, a burden and a gift all at once. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the platform came to a stop. The Queen stood before him once more, her gaze unwavering. She extended her limb again, this time pointing not outward but inward, toward the sphere. Carter understood, with a clarity that left no room for doubt, what she wanted him to do. Carter's fingers trembled as they hovered above the sphere, its surface shimmering like liquid mercury but warm to the touch. The alien Queen's gaze bore into him, unyielding and expectant, her crystalline features shifting in patterns that seemed to pulse with urgency. He could feel the weight of her will pressing down on him, not as coercion but as an undeniable truth, a call to action that transcended language or logic. Whatever this sphere was, it wasn't just an object, it was a conduit, a key, perhaps even a living entity bound by rules he couldn't yet comprehend. The platform beneath his feet vibrated faintly, resonating with the same frequency that had filled the chamber since his arrival. It was as though the structure itself was alive, responding to the moment unfolding before it. Around him, the Queen's attendants stood motionless, their forms dimmed to a soft glow, their presence both comforting and unnerving. They weren't merely witnesses to this event, they were participants, guardians of something far greater than Carter could grasp. He took a deep breath, steadying himself against the torrent of sensations coursing through him. His scientific mind screamed for analysis, for caution, for answers. But another part of him, the part that had been awakened by the vision the sphere had shown him, knew there was no time for hesitation. This wasn't about understanding. It was about trust. Trust in the unknown, trust in the Queen, and most terrifyingly, trust in himself. With a final exhale, Carter placed his hand firmly on the sphere. The moment his palm made contact, the world around him dissolved into light. It wasn't blinding, exactly, but all-encompassing, filling every corner of his perception until nothing else existed. Sounds flooded his ears, not words, but emotions given form. Awe, sorrow, hope, determination. Images flashed before his eyes faster than thought, each one more vivid than the last. He saw civilizations rising and falling, planets birthing life only to succumb to entropy, stars collapsing into black holes that birthed new galaxies. And through it all, he saw threads connecting everything, threads of energy, of purpose, of destiny. But amidst the cosmic tapestry, one image stood out, Earth. Not as it was now, teeming with humanity and struggling under the weight of its own contradictions, but as it could be. A planet thriving in harmony, its people united not by borders or ideologies but by a shared understanding of their place in the universe. It was beautiful, achingly so, and yet tinged with fragility. Carter realized with a pang of dread that this future wasn't guaranteed. It was potential, a possibility hanging precariously in the balance. As quickly as it had begun, the vision subsided, leaving Carter gasping for air. The sphere pulsed gently in his hand, its warmth now accompanied by a subtle vibration, as if acknowledging what he had seen. When he looked up, the Queen was closer than before, her swirling eyes fixed on him with an intensity that bordered on reverence. She extended one of her limbs again, this time gesturing toward the open expanse above them, where the alien sky stretched endlessly, filled with stars that burned brighter than any he had ever seen. Her message was clear, though it came without words. The sphere was meant to leave this place, to travel beyond the confines of the structure, this planet, this moment. It was a gift, or perhaps a test, and Carter was the chosen vessel. The realization hit him like a tidal wave, washing away any lingering doubts or fears. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about humanity, about the fragile blue world spinning silently in the void. If he refused, if he faltered, the opportunity might never come again. Summoning every ounce of courage he possessed, Carter stepped forward, clutching the sphere tightly in both hands. Its surface rippled in response, the patterns within it shifting to mirror the resolve hardening in his chest. The Queen's attendants parted to create a path, their forms glowing brighter as they acknowledged his decision. The platform beneath his feet began to rise once more, carrying him higher into the heart of the structure until he emerged into the open air. Above him, the alien ship loomed, its iridescent surface shimmering with an otherworldly light. It wasn't the same vessel that had brought the Queen and her entourage to Earth. This one was smaller, sleeker, designed for speed rather than grandeur. As Carter approached, a section of the hull peeled back like petals unfurling, revealing a cockpit unlike anything human engineers had ever conceived. The interior was organic, almost alive, with surfaces that pulsed faintly and controls that seemed to respond to thought rather than touch. The Queen followed him to the edge of the platform, her form glowing with an ethereal brilliance that made the desert sands below seem dull in comparison. For the first time since their encounter began, she lowered her gaze, her crystalline features rearranging themselves into a pattern that radiated something akin to gratitude, or perhaps farewell. Carter felt a lump rise in his throat as he met her eyes one last time, trying to convey everything he couldn't put into words, his gratitude, his determination, his fear. Without another moment's hesitation, he stepped into the ship, the sphere cradled protectively in his arms. The cockpit sealed itself behind him, the walls closing in with a soft hum that resonated through his very bones. Before him, the controls lit up, their surfaces rippling with colors that seemed to guide his hands instinctively. He didn't need instructions. The ship understood him, just as the sphere did. It was as if he had always known how to do this, as if the knowledge had been buried deep within him, waiting to be awakened. The engines roared to life, a sound that was less mechanical and more symphonic, like the song of creation itself. The ship lifted off the platform with impossible grace, ascending into the alien sky with a speed that defied physics. Below him, the Queen and her attendants grew smaller and smaller until they disappeared entirely, swallowed by the endless expanse of the Sahara. Carter glanced at the sphere in his lap, its surface now calm, almost serene, as if it too was preparing for what lay ahead. Through the ship's transparent canopy, Carter watched as Earth came into view, its familiar blue and green hues standing out against the infinite blackness of space. But something was different. The planet seemed brighter, as if illuminated from within. He realized with a start that it wasn't just Earth that had changed, it was him. The connection he had forged with the sphere, with the Queen, with the alien beings who had entrusted him with this mission, had altered him in ways he couldn't yet understand. He felt more aware, more alive, as if every cell in his body was vibrating in tune with the universe itself. And then, as the ship accelerated toward the edge of Earth's atmosphere, Carter noticed something strange. The stars ahead weren't static. They were moving, shifting, aligning themselves into patterns that seemed to beckon him forward. The sphere pulsed in response, its surface rippling with anticipation. Whatever awaited him out there, beyond the safety of his home planet, was calling to him, not just as a scientist, not just as a representative of humanity, but as something more. Something greater. The ship surged forward, breaking free of Earth's gravitational pull and plunging into the vastness of space. Carter gripped the sphere tightly, his heart pounding with a mixture of exhilaration and terror. He didn't know where he was going or what he would find when he arrived. All he knew was that he couldn't turn back. Not now, not ever. As the ship hurtled through the void, Carter felt the boundaries of his consciousness stretching, expanding to encompass the enormity of what lay before him. The stars outside the canopy weren't merely points of light. They pulsed with life, each one resonating like a heartbeat in the vast cosmic symphony. The sphere in his hands seemed to hum in harmony with them, its surface rippling with patterns that mirrored the constellations shifting around him. It was as if the universe itself was guiding him, drawing him toward some unseen destination. The ship moved with an intelligence of its own, responding not just to Carter's thoughts but to something deeper, perhaps even to the will of the alien queen who had sent him on this journey. He could feel it now, a connection between himself, the sphere, and the vessel that carried him. It wasn't control, exactly, but rather a shared purpose, a unity of intent that transcended individual agency. Every movement of the ship felt deliberate, every adjustment precise, as though it were navigating not just physical space but layers of existence beyond human comprehension. Time became fluid, slipping away from him like water through his fingers. Minutes stretched into hours, or perhaps seconds compressed into eternities. It was impossible to tell. The only constant was the sphere, its warmth anchoring him amidst the disorienting swirl of sensations. Occasionally, images would flicker across its surface. Distant worlds bathed in twin suns, oceans of liquid crystal beneath skies streaked with auroras, cities built from living stone that pulsed with bioluminescent light. These visions weren't random. They were invitations, glimpses of places he might visit, civilizations he might encounter. Each one filled him with awe, and a growing sense of responsibility. Carter's mind raced as he tried to make sense of it all. Was he being tested? Chosen? Prepared for something greater than himself? The questions swirled endlessly, but no answers came. Instead, there was only the steady rhythm of the ship's engines, the pulsing glow of the sphere, and the infinite expanse of stars ahead. He realized with a pang of clarity that understanding wasn't the point. Not yet, anyway. For now, his role was simply to trust, to follow where he was led, and to remain open to whatever revelations awaited him. And then, without warning, the ship slowed. The stars outside shifted, aligning themselves into a pattern that seemed almost deliberate, a gateway of sorts, marked by 3 luminous orbs arranged in a perfect triangle. Beyond them, the fabric of space itself appeared to ripple, as though reality had been folded back upon itself. Carter felt a shiver run down his spine as the ship approached the threshold, its engines humming softly in anticipation. The sphere pulsed brighter, its surface glowing with an intensity that made Carter squint. He tightened his grip instinctively, feeling its vibrations sync with the rapid beating of his heart. Whatever lay beyond that shimmering veil, he knew it was significant, perhaps even pivotal. His breath caught in his throat as the ship crossed the boundary, plunging into a realm unlike anything he had ever imagined. Here, space and time seemed to dissolve entirely. Colors danced in impossible hues, swirling together in patterns that defied logic. Sounds filled the air, not noise, exactly, but emotions given form. Joy, sorrow, wonder, longing. They washed over Carter in waves, each one leaving an imprint on his soul. He felt small, infinitesimally so, yet also connected to everything around him, as if he were both a single drop in an endless ocean and the ocean itself. In the center of this surreal landscape floated a structure, a massive, crystalline spire that stretched impossibly high, its facets refracting the kaleidoscopic light into dazzling displays. It was alive, unmistakably so, its surface rippling with energy that pulsed in time with the sphere in Carter's hands. As the ship drew closer, he noticed figures emerging from the spire, their forms shimmering with the same crystalline brilliance as the alien queen. They moved gracefully, their movements synchronized as if part of a larger whole. One figure stepped forward, separating itself from the others. It was taller than the rest, its presence radiating authority and wisdom. Though its features were different from those of the queen, there was a familiarity about it, an echo of her essence, perhaps, or a shared lineage. Its eyes, or what passed for eyes, locked onto Carter, and he felt the same piercing gaze that had first captured him on Earth. But this time, it wasn't just curiosity he sensed, it was recognition. The figure raised one of its multi-jointed limbs, gesturing toward the sphere. Carter hesitated for a moment, then extended it cautiously, unsure of what would happen next. The instant the sphere left his grasp, it floated upward, hovering between him and the crystalline being. Its surface erupted into a cascade of light, projecting images that filled the space around them. Earth, humanity, moments of triumph and tragedy, creation and destruction. It was as if the sphere was telling a story, not just of Carter's journey, but of the entire human race. The crystalline being watched silently, its expression unreadable but somehow compassionate. When the display faded, The sphere drifted back to Carter, settling gently into his hands once more. He looked up at the being, searching for some sign of approval or judgment, but found only calm assurance. Then, with a gesture so subtle it might have been missed, the being turned and motioned for Carter to follow. The ship descended toward the base of the spire, its hull dissolving seamlessly into the crystalline structure as if merging with it. Inside, the environment was unlike anything Carter had experienced before. The walls shimmered with inner light, their surfaces alive with moving patterns that seemed to narrate stories older than time itself. The air hummed with a frequency that resonated deep within his chest, filling him with a sense of peace he hadn't known he needed. The crystalline being led him through corridors that twisted and turned in ways that defied geometry, yet somehow always felt right. Along the way, other beings joined them, their forms glowing softly as they fell into step behind Carter. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being ushered toward something monumental, something that would change not just his life but the lives of everyone back on Earth. Finally, they reached a chamber at the heart of the spire. It was vast, its ceiling lost in shadow, its floor covered in intricate designs that pulsed with light. At its center stood another sphere, larger and more radiant than the one Carter held. It hovered above a pedestal, its surface alive with swirling patterns that seemed to contain entire galaxies within them. The crystalline being gestured for Carter to approach, its movements deliberate yet gentle. Carter stepped forward, his heart pounding. The smaller sphere in his hands vibrated in response, its glow intensifying as it drew closer to its larger counterpart. He stopped just short of the pedestal, unsure of what to do next. The crystalline being didn't offer guidance. Instead, it simply waited, its presence patient but expectant. Taking a deep breath, Carter extended the sphere toward the pedestal. As soon as it made contact with the larger sphere, a surge of energy coursed through the chamber, lighting up the walls and sending ripples of light cascading outward. The two spheres merged, their surfaces blending seamlessly as they became one. Images exploded into the air around them, more vivid and detailed than anything Carter had seen before. Planets formed and evolved, civilizations rose and fell, and threads of connection wove through it all, binding everything together in a tapestry of existence. Carter felt tears streaming down his face, though he couldn't say why. It wasn't sadness or joy, it was something deeper, something primal. He understood now, on a level beyond words, that he was witnessing the truth of the universe. Its beauty, its complexity, its fragility. And he realized, with a clarity that left no room for doubt, that humanity's role in this grand design was far greater than anyone had ever imagined. The crystalline being placed a limb on his shoulder, its touch surprisingly warm. Though no words were spoken, Carter felt a message pass between them, a promise, a charge, a destiny. Whatever came next, he knew he wouldn't face it alone. The chamber began to glow brighter, the merged sphere now a beacon of pure energy. Carter felt himself lifted gently, his body weightless as the light enveloped him. The crystalline beings formed a circle around him, their forms blending into the radiance. He understood then that this was not an ending but a beginning, a transformation. The sphere's energy flowed into him, filling every cell with knowledge, purpose, and an unshakable resolve. Visions of Earth flooded his mind, but they were different now. Hopeful, vibrant, alive with potential. The alien queen's face appeared in the light, her swirling eyes conveying gratitude and trust. As the brilliance reached its peak, Carter realized he was no longer just human. He was something more, a bridge between worlds. The light consumed everything, and when it faded, he was gone, returned to Earth, yet forever changed. Humanity's future awaited, and he would lead them not as a man, but as a messenger of the stars.